From Dana White putting the BMF title on the line to Eddie Alvarez giving a prediction, having fought both guys. Let's look at the pros' predictions on Gaethje versus Poirier. After putting on the fight of the year in 2018, the two former lightweight champs are finally ready to face each other off again. The fight has been booked as the main event of UFC 291 in Salt Lake City, and it's safe to say that the fans just can't wait for the showdown. But hold on, it gets better. UFC President Dana White announced that this won't be your ordinary bout because the BMF belt is on the line this time around, and I, for one, couldn't be more excited. Now, you might be wondering why the BMF belt has resurfaced, even though it was meant to be a one-time thing. Well, according to Dana, since Jorge Masvidal's retired, that belt is now vacant and many fighters want to compete for it. But we all know that's not the real story. The match between Poirier and Gaethje is meant to headline a pay-per-view, even if it's not for the belt. Just the idea of two of the most violent men on earth trying to beat the crap out of each other is enough for the fans. But here's the thing, the UFC doesn't make non-title fight main events anymore, unless your name is Conor McGregor. Now don't get me wrong, but the BMF belt does make the whole thing a lot more exciting. At the end of the day, we get to see the rematch we've all been waiting for, and both guys get a chunk of the pay-per-view points. It's a win-win. But honestly, I always knew that the rematch was inevitable. I mean, even Michael Bisping pointed out how the two fighters' paths have always been aligned. The UFC Hall of Famer made a video on his YouTube channel as soon as the BMF title fight was announced, saying that this fight would be a war, just like Gaethje and Poirier's first encounter. Over the past few months, all the fans had been campaigning to see the rematch finally happen. But Bisping pointed out how similar their careers have been since they fought each other. And let me tell you, it's a little crazy. After the fight of the year in 2018, both guys put on a long win streak before getting a shot at the interim title. Dustin beat Max Holloway, who was on a 13-fight win streak, and Justin beat Tony, who'd won 12 in a row. But that's not where the similarity ends, because neither of them were able to unify the belts against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And after bouncing back from that loss, the former undisputed champ Charles Oliveira submitted them both in a similar fashion. So not only did they have similar opponents, they even lost to the same two guys. The former middleweight champ thinks that the winner of this fight would fight Islam Makhachev for the belt. And since both guys have already lost two undisputed title fights, this will probably be their last opportunity to become the best in the world. So the stakes really are at an all-time high. And even though both Poirier and Gaethje deserve a title fight, Beneil Dariush would argue that he deserves to fight the champ first. There aren't many fighters who've been screwed over by the UFC as much as Benny. The number 5 ranked lightweight is currently on an 8-fight win streak, and he's about to take on Du Bronx in a title eliminator. And to make the situation worse, the winner of the Gaethje-Poirier rematch might jump ahead in line and get the next shot. Poor guy just can't catch a break. But Dariush is as classy as they come. The 35-year-old took his fighter hat off, saying he was glad the rematch got booked. Dariush went on to talk about how the two fighters first faced off 5 years ago, and they've both made significant improvements in their skill set since then. So, Beneil thinks this fight will come down to who's mentally tougher, and it seems like Justin Gaethje is at a point where he wants it more. The human highlight reel stepped up and took on a dangerous contender in a risky matchup, so he's looking to prove that he belongs at the top. As for Poirier, even though he won the first fight, he doesn't have the same hunger anymore. This, of course, was a reference to Poirier turning down a fight against Dariush because the Diamond thinks he's at a point in his career where he only wants the fights that excite him, and Beneil, despite being worthy, wasn't exciting enough. So it's hard to say whether he wants to win the rematch as desperately as his opponent. But honestly, you can't blame Dustin. The man has accomplished everything he could dream of, and now he gets to call the shots. But Beneil isn't the only fighter who's excited to see the fight take place. Many UFC stars were also campaigning for the rematch to be booked. Dober did an interview in which he was asked about the next matchup for his teammate Justin Gaethje. And guess what he said? Drew thought that it was the perfect time for both of these guys to fight again. And since they're both coming off bounce-back wins, either one of them is a single fight away from a title match. The 34-year-old was obviously rooting for his friend and teammate Justin Gaethje to get his revenge, but he might just want Dustin to lose, since they're both tied for the most knockouts in the lightweight division. Another lightweight contender, Jalen Turner, was asked for a prediction, and the Tarantula tried his best to stay in the middle. He thought Justin looked good in his last fight, but they're all competitors, so he can't favor anyone. The former featherweight title challenger Brian Ortega was in the audience when Poirier and Gaethje fought for the first time. And according to him, it was one of the best experiences of his life. T-City didn't have a horse in the race either. He just wished to see these gladiators in action one more time. With that being said, I should probably give you a look at how the last fight played out. Now, even though it's been 5 years, it's hard to make a prediction without considering the first fight. Justin was focused on landing his signature leg kicks to immobilize Poirier's movement, and the Diamond displayed his crisp boxing, outperforming Gaethje in almost every round. If you look at the scorecards for that fight before the knockout, 2 judges had the fight scored for Poirier, and it was a draw on the third scorecard. The bout was back and forth, and it looked like the momentum was shifting toward Justin in the 3rd round. But Poirier managed to give it his best championship rounds. I'd probably give the cardio advantage to Dustin because he's known for his high-paced style. And since the fight is in Salt Lake City, it might prove to be problematic for Gaethje in the later rounds. But the biggest factor in the rematch will probably be Justin's footwork. Back in the day, the highlight reel used to fight like a zombie. He was okay with taking shots to the head and just wanted to break his opponents mentally. This wasn't a good strategy against Dustin, though, who was much slicker in the striking department and also managed to survive the mental battle. But since then, Justin has used a lot of footwork, taking a more cautious approach. His fight against Tony Ferguson is the perfect example of that, so that it'll be interesting to see how this approach works against a guy like Poirier. Another thing to consider is the history of both the fighters in rematches. This would be Gaethje's first rematch inside the octagon. As for Poirier, he's had 3 rematches already and won all of them dominantly. The odds are close in this one, with Dustin being a slight favorite. So it's hard to break down how different the rematch would be from their first fight, but perhaps Eddie Alvarez knows what's going to happen since he's fought both guys. The Underground King has a tremendous amount of respect for his former opponents, and he thinks the biggest unknown factor is Dustin's desire. Ever since the Diamond beat Conor McGregor, he hasn't had the same aura around him. The former interim champ went to the commentary booth right after knocking out the Irishman and said that he doesn't love fighting anymore. He's also very financially stable. And in the fight game, people automatically assume you're not motivated anymore once you've made a lot of money. The former undisputed champ said that Justin still has a lot to prove in his career. And since he lost the last fight, he'll be coming in with all the fire. But that's all about the mental side of things. Alvarez thinks, skill-wise, Poirier is a lot better in the boxing department and could take advantage of Gaethje's defensive flaws, like he did in the first fight. Dustin's also improved massively at dealing with leg kicks, so much so that he started throwing some of his own in the rematch against Conor. So we shouldn't be surprised if both fighters come out with completely different game plans. The only thing that everyone can agree on right now is that this fight is a guaranteed banger. So there you have it, fight fans. From Eddie Alvarez picking a favorite between his former opponents to the BMF belt raising the stakes for the already anticipated rematch. Those were pros' predictions on Gaethje versus Poirier fight.